What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel. The season may be over, but I'm back this week to give you your fix of Celtic content. And today we're going to look at 5 players who could leave the club this summer. Yes, folks, welcome back to Celtic Fans TV. I hope you're all still basking in the glory of the League and Cup double. It's been nice to have a week off of the content. What a party we had last Saturday after Trophy Day in Malone's. It was absolutely brilliant. What an atmosphere. The celebrations across the city that day were absolutely brilliant, and it was great to get the chance to speak to Ange, David Turnbull and to Tom Rogic after the game in the fan media press conference as well. It was just a great day all round. But we're back today. We're back this week, going to bring you a wee series of videos. Today we're going to look at a few things, but mainly 5 players who could leave the club this summer. High turnover of players last summer transfer window, obviously. We lost so many big players and Ange had to rebuild the squad. And that's been well documented throughout the season. You would expect less turnover this summer, of course, but as Ange goes into the second phase of the project, if you like, the second phase of the rebuild, I suppose, we've probably overachieved for what we expected, given how last season started. But this season, I think there's still a lot of players that could go out, and I think we've got a few areas of the squad where we need to strengthen, and we'll touch on that later in the week. First of all, though, I want to talk about Aidan McGeady's interview on BBC Sports Sound yesterday. He gave a great interview with Kenny McIntyre. I thought he was really good. I actually like listening to Aidan McGeady. He's honest. I think he gave really good insight into his playing career. Really interesting stuff about his decision to move to Russia and what it was like there. I've watched all his open goal interviews, so I'm kind of familiar with it, but I thought he was really, really candid about his playing career. And obviously the thing that grabbed the headlines was him calling out the treatment that he got because he decided to play for the Republic of Ireland. Again, I think he was brilliant. I think he asked Kenny McIntyre the questions, and I think he spoke really well on it. Everybody knows why he got more abuse than other players across the country who, over years, have chosen to play for other countries apart from Scotland. It was because he played for Celtic, and it was because he chose to play for the Republic of Ireland. And I don't know how many people knew that he made that decision at 14 and not at 17 or 18 when he was breaking into the Celtic first team. But I think everybody knows why. He was given absolute dog's abuse. I think that's clear. Maybe it's not addressed in the mainstream media as well as it should be, and I think that's why he asked the questions to Kenny McIntyre, and he didn't really get any answers back. He just got more questions, but I think it's clear, and I think he spoke really well about it. It clearly didn't affect him. He's a confident character. We knew that as a player, and I think he highlighted it quite well. But I just wanted to talk about it before I got into this video, because I listened to it this morning. I thought he spoke really, really well, and I don't think it's a surprise to MD. Certainly not MD that follows Celtic as to why he get more abuse than most other players that choose not to play for Scotland. In other news today, Dyson Maida has officially joined Celtic on a 4-year deal. The deal was basically a formality. It was part of the loan agreement from January, but Yokohama Marinos did confirm it today. He joins Celtic on a 4-year contract. I've spoke a lot about Maida in recent videos just before the season finished. Being a real asset for us, it fits in to what Ange wants to do absolutely perfectly, and I think he's going to be a big player for us next season. He got 8 goals in his appearances in the second half of the season after he arrived at the club. His energy's been fantastic, and I think particularly in the bigger games, his pressing off the ball, the intensity that he plays with, is really, really important for us. And you think about going forward next season to what I expect to be a really tough season domestically, but obviously going into the Champions League without the ball, we're going to have to be so strong, and he'll be a key part of that. I mentioned it last week that the number of games that he's played in, the number of games that he started, show you how important he is for Ange Postecoglou, and I expect that to continue next season. So it's good to get him in. Technically, I suppose the first signing of the summer, even though it was a formality that was agreed in January as a permanent signing. I still expect us to get a few more, probably between 4 and 6 over the course of the summer. But as I say, we'll get to that later in the week. We're here to talk about 5 players who could leave Celtic this summer. As I say, a high turnover last season, but if you look through the squad, there's still a number of players there who you think have been on the fringes, who you think probably aren't good enough, and more importantly, they don't fit in to what Ange is trying to do. We've had a full season with Ange now, so it's clear who the fringe players are, the guys who haven't had many minutes this season, who've really struggled to make squads and to get game time when they've been on the bench. I think the range of players is clear. But the question for the club is, how long do they have left in their contract? Can we get potential suitors for them, and can we move them on? That's probably the most difficult thing, because when fringe players aren't playing, there's not a lot of clubs looking at them in terms of bringing them in, and there's a few that we'll go through who I'm struggling to think of any potential buyers for, because they've barely kicked a ball for the best part of maybe 18 months to 2 years now, so it might be really difficult for the club to move them on. But I think there's a few players there who the club need to get rid of. I think it will really help Ange to get rid of some deadwood, and then to bring in more fresh faces that fit what he's trying to do, and to get a real tight-knit group of maybe 22 to 24 players who are mostly his players or players he inherited who have really bought into what he's trying to do. I think that's the goal this summer. But we'll get to the 5 players who I think should leave the club. You can let us know if you could pick any 5 players for the Celtic squad to leave this summer. Let us know in the comments below who it would be for you. We're going to start with number 1, and it's everybody's favourite left back. Yes, Bolingoli, who can forget about him? £3 million in July 2019. He actually made 2 appearances this season, believe it or not. That game against Livingston is only one that stands out in my mind. It was really strange because there was a couple of games where he just came in out the blue. He hadn't even been making squads, and then he started a couple of games and then disappeared again. It was really strange, but I guess that was due to the makeup of the squad at the start of the season. Everything was a bit of a mess. There was chaos, and Ange obviously felt that he had to play him in a couple of games. But it's been really clear in his time at the club that he's just not got the quality. He seems quite erratic. His performances when he first came, you think back to the Cluj game where they put us out the Champions League qualifiers. There was so much talk about Bolingoli in that early period of his career, and a lot of people called it early doors that he wasn't good enough to make the cut at Celtic. But the nail in the coffin is obviously the trip that he took during the COVID season. Everybody said that his only crime was being too horny, but whatever it was, he shouldn't have went to Spain right at the height of the pandemic. And it's mad to think back now the disaster that season was. That wasn't even the worst thing that happened in that season in terms of no following COVID protocols. But he's got to go, Bolingoli. The only difficulty is he's got 12 months left on his contract. So do we get any potential suitors? This is the problem. Can we get somebody to come in and buy him? Or do we just have to leave him there and let him run down the last 12 months of that contract and then just let him leave for nothing at the end of next season? He is one of these players who you think, is anyone going to come in for him and really pay any money? I think it'd be a nominal fee, really, something really small, because we're not going to recoup the £3 million we paid for him, given the performances that he's put in and the lack of football that he's played here at Celtic. So I think Bolingoli is top of the list in terms of players that need to get moved on. We're short in the left back area. We know that, and I'd say that cost us in the semi-final against Rangers, because we had to move Ralston over to left back, put Welsh at right back when Juranovic and Taylor went off. We know that left back is an area that we need to improve. There's no any secret there. But I think if Bolingoli goes, can Scales be the third choice, and then we bring someone else in to push Greg Taylor and get a bit more competition in that area of the pitch, because I don't think Bolingoli's offering any competition at all. And if we can move him on, we definitely should this summer. Number 2 on the list is Vasilis Barkas. Just an absolute disaster. There's not a lot I can add to that signing to give you any insight in it. Everybody knows, watching. It's just been a disaster. £4.5 million for AEK Athens, and at the time we thought it was a good signing. I actually remember vividly tweeting about it, thinking this looks like a really good move for Celtic. Greek international goalkeeper, a good fee, a decent reputation to come in after the Foster deal fell through and he decided to stay at Southampton. I thought this looks like a good move. We were actually over in Athens for the second leg. That was the first year at the channel. We went to Athens for the second leg. We obviously get put out. But I thought Barkas was going to be a decent signing for Celtic. There was a few signings that summer, and we'll come on to another one just shortly, that seemed like really good moves that just fell to pieces and never materialised into good players at all. And Barkas at $4.5 million, still got 2 years left on his contract. And I think that's even more difficult than the fringe players who have got 12 months left, because there's no danger the club are going to pay Barkas up. And listen, the manager might want to keep him there. Maybe he thinks that that's a good balance there to have him as a backup. He did play one game, I think, this season against St Johnstone on Boxing Day where Hart was unavailable. So maybe the manager thinks he's decent enough to have there as a backup, and the club are happy to let him run down that contract, because are we going to get MD to come in and buy him? I don't know. There was talk throughout last season that he could maybe go back to Athens. I don't think it's materialised, or anything concrete is materialised. Well, how much money could we get back for that $4.5 million? Probably very, very little. Similar to the case with Bolingoli and a couple of other players in this list. How much money could we recoup? Probably not a lot, because of the level of performance that they've had here and how little football they've played. But having 3 years left is a difficult one for the club, because they're never going to let him go. And did they let it go another year and try and get someone to come in for him if they want to move him on? Or let him run it down, but let him run down 2 years is a long time to have someone there if you think that he doesn't fit with the plans. But I think Barkas is another one that if the club can move him on this summer, they definitely should. The next one on the list might be a bit of a surprise. Not a surprise given how the last couple of months has unfolded. But I think if 6 months ago you'd have said that Christopher Jullien will leave Celtic in the summer, you would have been a bit perplexed, because I think we were looking forward to having him back available. Certainly early in the season, we thought we missed him because of the shambles we were having with the defence. But certainly for the first couple of months of the season onwards, the partnership that Carter Vickers and Starfelt built was so strong, and it was such a key, integral part of us going on to win the title. And that's why Jullien, even once he became fit again, couldn't get in the squad. He couldn't get any minutes because that partnership was so strong. And that's the one area of the team that most managers, including Ange Postecoglou, and he said this season, the goalkeeper and the centre-halves are not an area of the team that you want to rotate. You want to have continuity there. You want the partnerships to be strong. And that's happened with Hart, Starfelt and Carter Vickers. So Jullien just hasn't had a look in. He came to the club again in 2019 for £7 million. He was brilliant in the first year. He scored big goals for Celtic. He's relatively quick. He can defend well. He did have problems up against big physical strikers though. Well-documented problems against Livingston, against Lyndon Dykes. But I thought he was a good player. He scored big goals, as I say. Goal against Lazio, the goal in the cup final against Rangers. He was a real threat in the opposing box. But you see the scenes on Trophy Day where it's like Stilian Petrov vibes. You remember Stilian Petrov on Trophy Day when he was going to leave the club, and I think he maybe had a fallout with Gordon Strachan towards the end of the season, and he looks disconsolate on the periphery of the celebrations. And Jullien last week kind of moped about and didn't really get involved with much his teammates during the celebrations. I think you could tell that he's on his way out the door. Now again, how much £7 million can we recoup? I think he's a good player. I think he's one on the list that there will be clubs interested in. He's just had a bad injury. It's not that he's absolutely collapsed during his Celtic career, that his performances have been so poor that no one's going to want to buy him. I think he is one player that there might be interest in, but I just don't think he's part of Ange Postecoglou's plans at all. And as I say, I think he's good enough that he could go to another club and play regularly. He came from Toulouse in Ligue 1, and I think he could go back to maybe a club like that of a similar stature in Europe and play week in and week out. I think he's good enough to do that. But I think certainly if Celtic sign Cameron Carter Vickers permanently, he's just not going to fit with what Ange Postecoglou wants to do. And listen, that's as much down to the job that Starfelt and Carter Vickers have done. But I just don't see any future for him. And if we can move him on and get decent money for him, it's a good opportunity to do so. I think we still need to strengthen in the centre-back area, and I'd expect the manager to be looking at that area this summer, but I think Jullien might just be one that leaves in this transfer window. Next up, it's Albian Ajeti. Now, going back to that summer again, we talked about Barkas. Albian Ajeti made a promising start in that COVID season. Obviously, it was a disaster and it fell to pieces, but he scored some goals early doors. He looked like a really good finisher. But again, he just disappeared. He's really, really injury prone, which hasn't helped him at all. And he looked disinterested for most of that first season at the club when he was playing. The early promise totally disintegrated. And I think, like most players, again, maybe symptomatic of being involved in that Celtic team, because they looked so disorganised. They looked like burdened when they were on the pitch. They looked like they didn't have a clue what they were trying to achieve on the pitch at times, and that doesn't help a striker particularly, who probably needs service, who needs a cohesive team unit round about him. I think he is a goal scorer, but he's not going to cut it, and he's certainly not going to cut it in an Ange Postecoglou Celtic team. Again, few appearances this season. Started that game again, and he pulls up with a hamstring injury. That was a time where Kyogo was struggling for fitness, Giakoumakis was struggling for fitness, and it was maybe a wee window for Ajeti to try and build back some credibility and show that he maybe had some sort of future even as a squad player in this Celtic team, but it never happened and the injuries killed him again. But for £4.5 million, another one who's got 2 years left to run on his contract. Difficult one for the club again. Can they garner any interest in him? Can they get any money back from the £4.5 million that we paid West Ham? £7 million at West Ham, £4.5 million to come to us. You'd expect that to go down again if he is to move on. I'd be surprised if we could recoup £1 or £2 million for him. And again, with 2 years left, never going to pay him up. So he might be one that, even though I think we should move him on, we might not be able to, and he might just have to linger around for next season, and maybe even further to let his contract run down, and see if there is going to be any interest in him. It's a hard one. As I say, I think he's a goal scorer, and I'm sure he could get a club, no problem, and go and play. He'll need to sort out his injury history, but I don't see any future at Celtic, and certainly not under Ange. Right, so the last one is Myla Sorrell. Thinking back to last season, he was one of the players who hadn't featured at all until we played Lille in the Europa League, and it just reminds you how bad that season got, that when he came in, we thought he was the next coming of N'Golo Kante. It was really, really bad. The performances were so poor that just having someone come in with a bit of freshness, and he played well that night, and you can see what his qualities are. But I think as the time's gone on in his Celtic career, it stands out that he's maybe just not got it. It's difficult to play in midfield for Celtic. You need a lot about you, and I think he's really rough round the edges, Sorrell. I don't think his passing ability is anywhere near good enough. I think he can break up play, he can get about the pitch and make interceptions and make tackles, but he's just not quite at the standard to play for Celtic. And I think in that area of the pitch, we've got a lot of options. Beaton has obviously left, but we've got Ajeti, who we're looking for to step up next season. We've got McCarthy there as well. McGregor is obviously the first choice in that deeper position. We know that McGregor has the versatility and the quality to play further forward, but certainly he looks like the preferred number 6 for Ange Postecoglou. So we've got Ajeti there. That's a position that we might strengthen. McCarthy signed up on a much longer contract. His contract runs till 2025, so I don't expect him to be moved on just one season after joining. But I think Sorrell is one that could go, and probably should go. Now, again, 2 years left in the contract. What do you do? There's 3 or 4 players on this list I've said this with. 2 years left. It's a difficult one for the club if nobody's going to come in and take him. Could he go out on loan? I don't know. I certainly don't think he's got a future. And if we can move him on permanently this summer, then I think we definitely should. So there you go. That is a list of 5 players that I think Celtic should move on this summer. players that I can't see how they fit into Ange Postecoglou's plans. And going forward into the Champions League, I think if we can get some of the fringe players moved on, maybe free up some budget, free up some wage bill for Ange to go and invest in players that he likes, players that have been identified with the new scouting team that's there, with Mark Lawwell. I think going on last season's hit rate from Ange, you've got to trust him to go and invest any money that can be freed up by moving players on, and get players that fit with what he's trying to do. That's the main thing. That's the big thing that we got right last season. And I think Ange did it just about on his own, it looked like to me, because there wasn't a lot of change behind the scenes in the scouting department, although there has been this summer, I accept that. But Ange knew the players. He had identified the players that fit the system, that fit the style of play, and that's why so many of them were successful this season. So that's 5 players I think we should move on. Throughout the week, there's going to be more videos coming, and we can maybe talk about the areas that we need to improve in more detail and where we might see Celtic strengthen the squad this summer. Like this video, comment with your own thoughts below. As I say, if you could pick 5 players to leave, let us know who it would be in the comments section. And don't forget to subscribe. We're approaching 35,000. The sooner we can get there, the better, because that's a nice wee milestone on the way to 40,000. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later on in the week.